Ichigo has always been able to see ghosts, but after he meets Rukia, a member of the mysterious Soul Society, he is inducted into the order and becomes a Soul Reaper. Now he's got to hunt evil spirits called Hollows to protect his friends and family, and attend high school and keep his grades up. It's Tite Kubo's hit manga Bleach, with over 130 million copies in circulation. Today on Truth, Beauty, Comics.
Welcome to Truth, Beauty, Comics. I'm Levi, a cartoonist.
And I'm Felix, a guy who likes comics.
And this is the podcast where we look for transcendence in a pulpy medium. Today we'll be talking about the first two volumes of Tite Kubo's Bleach. But, before we get into that, Felix, I think, as you get older, you start thinking about the afterlife, maybe things you don't reflect on as a kid. And I'm sure you believe kind of what the church has always taught about it, but I've formed my own opinion. And I really believe that when we die, we actually go to a place called the Soul Society, not heaven. Hell does exist, but the Soul Society is really what heaven is about. But if you get tied to Earth, you actually have the risk of becoming, a hollow, and you go around eating your family. But there's good news in this situation because there's this group of teenagers that go around, and when they cut your head off, that actually cleanses your soul from the sin you commit as a hollow, not the sin you've committed on Earth, because you can still go to hell for the sin you committed on Earth. And then you get to go pass through into the other life. So, this is kind of my own personal philosophy that I've just developed out of common sense, right? And I was kind of surprised to find that it seems like Tite Kubo shares my worldview.
Yeah. This was how I grew up too. I was always taught this.
Right. It's biblical, I think, right?
It seems like a very reasonable, easily approachable system.
Exactly.
No spoilers, but wait till you actually see the Soul Society, and there are even more questions raised, let's say.
Yeah. I can't wait.
So this is one of my favorite mangas. So for newer listeners, I'm a bit more of a manga guy, and Levi is fairly new to manga. More just knows Western comics. And Bleach, so this started coming out in English when I was a teenager, and I was like the perfect age to just think this is the coolest thing ever. I was completely obsessed with Bleach. I had a Bleach t-shirt, constantly read the manga. I must have read the first volume of Bleach close to 60, 70 times. I just always had Bleach.
How old were you? I'm curious.
So let's see, when I think I first read this, maybe 13 or so.
Yeah.
I remember I was a couple of years younger still than Ichigo, who's 15 at the beginning of the series.
Okay.
And so it's still kind of and a lot, I feel like a lot of stories for that age range, the kid is like 13 or 14, like kind of a little bit younger. And part of what made Bleach really cool is that it has this, mid 2000s teenage edge to it.
Yeah. He's kind of emo, right?
Yeah. That just at least when I was 13, just grabbed me. And related to that, it has just this style to it.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into, which sort of he gets even better at. I think volumes maybe 6 through 20 are the real peak of that, where it's just and we'll sort of talk about this, but he'll have most chapters have these cover pages, especially early on, where you have the characters in just these different fashions and things that'll give these kind of iconic images that really stick with you.
Yeah.
Especially if you, like me, were reading it as a pretty young person. But Levi, this is your first sort of encounter with Bleach. What do you think so far?
So I'll say that I wouldn't say I've read some manga. I'm not a huge manga reader, right? And I wouldn't say I loved manga. To be honest, I felt like who was the biography that we were reading? The manga biography that was thicker than a phone book.
Tezuka.
Yeah, I found that pretty hard to get through, honestly. It was interesting, but it wasn't didn't grab me.
This is the biography, the manga biography.
The biography specifically, yeah. And other mangas I've kind of gotten into. I've read some. My kids are more into manga than I am. But pretty much in the first few pages, basically once his dad shows up, I was like, I'm going to love this. Because it was cracking me up. The humor in this is just fantastic to me. It was just the tone, I started to get like the tone pretty quickly, like he's going
Yeah.
for, and so it kind of grabbed me right away, and I thought it was a blast. I thought this was a great read. It's thick, it's big, so you're kind of like, when you pick it up, you're like, am I getting myself into something I'm not going to really enjoy? Is this going to be a chore? And I'm like, I'm tearing through this. I'm already through like almost the second volume
Yeah,
and
because
onto
you have the
beyond
three
it.
in one
Yeah,
volumes, right?
yeah,
Yeah, those I
yeah.
know it's those are so much cheaper. It's really nice. The paper's like thinner, so you sometimes get a little bit of bleeding. But in terms of just the cost, it's so nice. And it's nice because especially with action mangas, I find more action-oriented mangas, I just blow through a volume. So I
Mm-hmm.
prefer to read a three in one because I really like feel like okay, I'm getting my money's worth. I'm really sitting down. I've got this hefty thing that like yeah, I'm gonna read it quickly because there's a lot of bash pow boom dom. But yeah, it does. I know, and it and I think Bleach it has. I kind of think of it as having this sort of propulsive energy that just like
Mm-hmm.
keeps you going, right? As it even as it's kind of switching, especially in the sort of early volumes there's a lot of like character humor that Kubo is really good at, and he kind of flips between the character stuff and the action.
Mm-hmm.
And the action, I think he does a really good job of getting us invested in fights. We see this already sort of in these first two volumes. The third volume, which we'll talk about in a later episode, I think is one of the best in the way that it sort of you care deeply about the fight that's going on. But I think yeah, there's this sort of like I said, there's just this energy that like
Yeah.
pushes me forward as I'm reading that like I constantly want to get to the next page and the next chapter and the next volume. Um,
Yeah, I think it is like, there's something about, and we could, just manga is fascinating to me, just because how quickly it's produced. Artists are drawing like 16 to 20 pages a week,
yeah, it's
which is
insane.
insane. Yeah, it's at a pace that's really hard to fathom. Their work ethic is very
And
different
oftentimes
than
they
kind of the,
have like one main assistant. It's like
yeah, yeah,
his assistant and just blowing through it. I mean, it's crazy,
yeah,
and like, and to have the stories, and I mean, it's wild that it even can get produced, let alone that it can
yes,
be of this quality. And you sometimes hear these stories of manga artists, mangaka, just being overwhelmed by it. So like, there's one very famous one. Oh, I'm forgetting the name, but he did Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter. Um, I think it's Togashi. He sort of famously like had illnesses and just like taken years off uh because of the physical strain of doing manga and Tite Kubo similarly I mean so he initially planned this to be ideally like if it was popular enough and the magazine Weekly Shonen Jump where it was published would continue to take it he had initially said okay like I have a 5-year plan and ended up running for 15 years there are
wow,
74 volumes
oh my gosh,
and he and there's this story for those who haven't read a lot of manga tends to get broken up into arcs sort of long stories like so the volumes we've read are in the Karakura town arc because they're mostly sort
mm,
of around Ichigo's hometown of Karakura town and then there's the Soul Society arc and then there's the Arinkar arc the Fullbring arc, and then the Thousand Year Blood War arc. So in 74 volumes, you have basically five big stories. So the second one is like considered, is pretty much universally considered one of the greatest like action adventure ever. And then the third arc, it's got good stuff in it. It has really excellent stuff in it. But it's like just goes on forever and it's so derivative of what came before and it like
hmm,
it's just it just feels like he's sort of treading water for a long period. I mean, and it's still really
yeah,
well executed because he is such an excellent writer and he is such an excellent illustrator, but in terms of like it's just not on the level. Um he was kind of dying, he was just like
really,
himself over this manga and he like kept going back and forth he kept getting colds and he kept like wanting to quit basically and he I don't know exactly when this happened but I think towards the end of that arc or beginning of next one he got this letter from this little boy who'd been given 18 months to live. And the boy talked about how depressed he'd been, and that reading Bleach like had just made him excited about things again, and that he like felt
Hmm.
like himself again, and he was reading through Bleach, and he said in his letter like, I might like I'll probably die before you finish this comic, but like if you can please do one thing for me, just like you're the most amazing cartoonist I've ever seen. Do Bleach exactly as you want to. Don't let anyone tell you to do it any other way.
Hmm.
And Kubo had just this like burst at the end where like the quality, particularly the story writing, just jumped back up, and like the final arc is just phenomenal.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's like
Okay.
rushed at certain points, but he did it. He like got to the end
Yeah.
of the story he wanted to tell. And I think stories like this are quite common uh for mangaka, because it's just grueling. Like it is,
Yeah.
it's you sort of imagine like, oh, the people who produce comics, it sounds really fun, and it's like this is more than full-time job where everything rests on one person's shoulders usually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting to me because the it's so I think this is one of the things that makes it so good. It reminds me a lot of, I mean, the closest analog I can think of um is newspaper comics, really, where you have one artist who's producing at like a, a crazy high rate. Even newspaper cartoonists wouldn't work as fast as,
Yeah, I mean, it's still
manga
because you're
artists.
doing basically like 3-4 pages a day for a
Yeah.
weekly
Yeah.
manga.
But there's just that repetition. You can see that there's, the way they draw, they're using certain shortcuts, but it's kind of a language that they've done to produce really quickly with really amazing results. I think much better. I don't know. It's the conventions they've established do action in a way that I think really only recently in the last, have superheroes comics started to catch up. I mean,
Yeah,
these manga made some breakthroughs that it seems like, just Western comics didn't really have. They look so stiff in
yeah,
comparison, and they were kind of locked in with their style. And, only there's certain artists I think that are now very popular, that have taken kind of the manga, kind of conventions and brought them over to superhero comics more, and it works really, really well. But there's just certain things like the way they use action lines, right? The way they pose, different, the way they use sound effects, right? Or, is they're as big a character, just every panel pretty much has a massive, really elaborately lettered sound effect that is part of the action, right?
yeah,
And just it reads, the action is so much more fun to read in a lot of ways. And not to mention, just there's little things that I think, the comedy here is, it's an action thing that you're reading, but it's also as funny as like a newspaper cartoon or something like that.
yeah,
Like something, it's, they shift between these kind of serious dramatic moments, and even the character designs, that's an anime manga convention where if like it's a funny moment, they turn into
like switch into
caricatures of
chibi.
themselves.
Yeah, the little, yeah.
Yeah, is that what that's called, chibi? Yeah.
Chibi is the sort of
They
exaggerated little, yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, but it's a range that like most Western comics don't have these days.
yeah,
That they're able to shift between like serious dramatic action into just like, really silly comedy.
yeah. And I think that is one of my. We will sort of get into the nitty gritty of these two volumes that we read, but like a very big picture thing. So there's different kinds of manga, right? There's those aimed at girls, shoujo, those aimed at like late teenage, young men, 20s, seinen. There's I think a corresponding female one. There's various
Mm-hmm.
kinds of. And the one that I've read the most of is boys manga, shonen manga, which is like Bleach,
Mm-hmm.
Naruto, One Piece, One Punch Man, that kind of thing. Tends to be very action oriented, though not necessarily. Something like Hikaru no Go or Death Note are not. Um, one one thing that tends to happen over the course of long mangas that are more action oriented is there's this sort of burst of creativity in the early volumes. And the first like 5 to 10 volumes, you've got these great stories that are really compelling and they're told, in 5 to 10 chapters. And then for 5 or 10 volumes, you've got like they're a little bit longer, things are given some space to breathe, it's still working well.
Mm-hmm.
And this definitely happens with Bleach, and then they just get stretched more and more because you've only got so many ideas and you want to keep the gravy train going or you want to keep your story
Yeah.
going and you have more of these extremely elongated like fight sequences before and then you get the sort of good the I mean I don't want to say good but like the character stuff the more the and I mean so like right the kind of joke with Dragon Ball Z is always that like the episode of the anime starts, and you're like theme song, wow, and there's two guys standing next to each other, and they just stand there and stare at each other and talk for the entire episode, and they don't say anything, and then it's like next time one of them will punch the other, and it just becomes this, and I mean
Slog.
I love Dragon Ball. I'm not, I don't, but like there is this tendency that things kind of get so stretched out, um, and I think Bleach does a really good job later on as it gets more, let's say, intensely action heavy at making the fights really matter and have interesting character dynamics going on in every fight, in addition to like interesting battle dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly the first like 25-ish volumes do this really like better than almost anything I've ever seen. Um, but there is this sometimes there's this tendency in boys manga to let the character moments slip over time.
Mm.
And that is one criticism I have of a lot of manga that I like. Is that like it when it's really balanced out. Like these early volumes of Bleach, I think do just the right amount of here's character stuff, here's cool fight, here's character stuff, here's cool fight.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be interested. Maybe we can save this for the end too. But I'd be interested to talk about kind of the role where this fits and why this is so appealing. Because you mentioned you were 13. My son, he's 13, loved this. He's like devoured this. Um, and like, what role is this kind of playing like for boys? Why is
Yeah,
this? And maybe that this genre in particular. But maybe we'll save that to the end if we want to kind of dive
yeah.
into the plot a
Or
little
maybe
bit and
even a
start
future
talking about that.
episode on it after we've read a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's good stuff
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe if we want to, so in these 2 volumes, there are basically 4 main stories. So we'll kind of go through each one. Um, the first, in the first volume, so each volume, sorry, I should say just one of the one of the things I love about the individual volumes is like the Tite Kubo, right? There will be a character on the cover, right? So you've got Ichigo on the cover of the first volume, right? You open it up, you got a little message from him, from the author Kubo, and then you'll get this title page that's sort of for the volume and it's thematic for the volume. It'll have this sort of line of I think it's usually Japanese poetry that then obviously gets translated, but occasionally I think it is English that Kubo writes that he sees as sort of expressing something about the character and the situation the character is in this volume. And like there are some that are really evocative. The one for volume 5 has always stuck with me, and we'll get to that in time. But you have sort of this line of poetry and a title for the volume, right? So and you'll have this small image of part of a character, usually eyes, but not necessarily. So you've got Ichigo staring at something. You have the line, "We fear that which we cannot see." And then it's Bleach 1, Strawberry and the Soul Reapers. So Ichigo, his name means strawberry. And they sort of uh,
Ah.
didn't totally know what to do with that translation wise in the first volume, and so they have some stuff with strawberry in the first couple volumes that kind of falls away. Um, but that's just sort of something
Yeah,
that
they never. It's funny because I realized that reading this, it's Ichigo quote unquote strawberry Kirasaki, but they
yeah,
never
but I
call him
don't think
strawberry. Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't
it's
think.
just yeah, there are a couple little strange translation things in like the first volume or two. Like at one point, they kind of refer to a character um as oh yeah, like she's best friends with this guy I've known since 8th grade, and like you can say this guy to mean a girl in English, but you don't really. And like
Mm,
it's a girl, and the character is not like an extremely feminine character. And so when I first got this volume and read it a bunch of times before getting the second and third and fourth and fifth, etc., I was confused as to whether it was a guy or a girl, and it's a girl. There are like a few translation things in the first
yeah.
volume or two that I'm not crazy about, but moving on. So the first chapter um, introduces Ichigo, who is this 15-year-old high school student who can see ghosts. And we get to know, we have kind of a sense of his character pretty quickly, where he's very rebellious but has a really good heart and cares a lot
Yeah.
about other people. Doesn't necessarily like always show it, obviously, but he does a lot for other people and for ghosts. And one night, Rukia Kuchiki, a soul reaper, appears in his room and claims to be hunting something called a hollow. And Ichigo is like, I have, like, this is not real. You're a ghost dressed up in a weird kimono.
Well, at first he
Um,
thinks she's an intruder, but his dad
yeah,
can't see her. Yeah.
yeah, and she's shocked that he can see her, first off, and then she eventually sort of puts him into this like binding curse thing, and explains that she's a supernatural being who guides souls to the afterlife and purifies these evil spirits called hollows. There's this hollow who's attacking Ichigo's family, and it turns out the hollow has been looking for Ichigo because Ichigo has this just astonishing spiritual power that is pretty much unheard of amongst human beings who are still alive. He tries to basically sacrifice himself. Rukia saves him. In the process, is terribly hurt, is not going to be able to beat the Hollow. Says, look, if you want to save your family, I can transfer part of my powers to you. Unexpectedly, Ichigo absorbs all of her powers, becoming a full-fledged Soul Reaper. With Rukia weakened and stranded in the human world, Ichigo therefore must take over her duties. He destroys that hollow, and then it continues in future. But that's the setup. That's the opening chapter. What was your impression reading this first chapter? You said once it introduced the dad, who's just a great character.
Yeah, I mean,
You
it should
really
be
started
noted.
to
So the
vibe.
dad has this weird. It seems like he's trying to like teach him like tough love,
Yeah,
but his version of tough love is to like attack him just
yeah. When he's like a
randomly at
minute
random times.
later, and he's like
Yeah,
still like completely depressed over his wife's death, which I mean I get it, like 3-ish years ago, I think, and
yeah.
has this huge like massive wall
Memorial. Yeah,
shrine dedicated to her with this picture of her and stuff. And Ichigo has the two younger sisters, one who's like very bright and peppy and homemakery, and one who's just like kind of grumbly, and whom I really enjoy. Yeah, yeah, but yeah,
yeah,
what you make of this on your first read?
yeah. So I mean, it's immediately sucked me in just with kind of the characters. They were cracking me up. I think Ichigo is he's a great character for a as kind of an avatar of a lot of adolescent feelings, I'd say, right? Where he's kind of emo, he's kind of angry, but he's also a person who is a good kid. I mean, he loves his family, right? He fights with his dad, or his dad literally they like get in these like huge fighting matches and stuff like that, but there's no sense of like deep rebellion or anything like that, or hatred. He loves his sisters and he wants to protect them, and that's really kind of what kicks this off, is that like he's someone who will basically do anything to kind of protect his family. He loves them. He's a typical kind of kid. And yeah, and then once you start reading, I think the action, and I know it improves, but it starts off really strong right
Yeah,
off the bat. And
yeah.
it looks great. I mean, like, I don't know, what, I don't know what it is, but, there's some, I think there's like a deep seated desire in every young teen boy's heart to have a huge sword and go around like, like a katana just looks great. It's the idea of like killing demons with a katana sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know.
There's this funny thing. This relates to something about Bleach. So when Bleach started in, I want to say 2004, it was one of what's called the Big Three, which is the three most popular manga in Japan at the time. It was Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach. Uh, in One Piece, the protagonist's goal is to become the Pirate King. In
Mm-hmm.
Naruto, I forget exactly what it is, but basically it's to be the best ninja ever, right? So you've got this very clear, theoretically achievable goal, right? Think Pokemon. I want to become a Pokemon master, right? It's this sort of like I'm like a boy who doesn't have any skills, or maybe has a little bit or something, or a teenager, however old Luffy is supposed to be in One Piece, I forget. Um, and I want to become the greatest and achieve this, right? And then you have oodles and oodles and oodles of stories out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bleach has had an interesting, in terms of popular reception, Bleach was like one of the three most popular manga in the world for a decade or so. And then people kind of soured on it for maybe 8 or so years. And then in the last 3 or 4 years, everyone has come back around to my and I've had the whole time, which is that Bleach is awesome. And so now people love Bleach again, in part because the tail end of the manga was never turned into an anime. The anime ended before that. I mean, technically, they said it went on hiatus, but it ended. And 3 years ago, they started serializing it in this like sort of new contemporary widescreen, shorter seasons, really carefully crafted anime. The Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. It's just massively popular. I think it's had
Mm.
three of its 4 seasons out so far, and now everybody is watching that and realizing Bleach is awesome. And it's always been great. But in this long period of time where people said, "Oh no, Bleach sucks," actually, one of the criticisms was Ichigo doesn't have a goal. Like, why should we care about him? And
Yeah.
I actually find Ichigo's goal to be much more immediately resonant than those of a lot of other shonen protagonists, even though I enjoy those other shonen manga. Because his goal is just, I want to protect the ones I love. Like, I want to
Yeah.
keep people safe. And I think that's something that's very deep. I mean, it's everybody has it, but I think especially young men have this sense like, I want to keep people safe. I want to help make sure that things are okay.
Yeah.
And like that's really compelling for me. Especially as we sort of get to know his character in the third volume, which we won't get into today, and see kind of some of why he has this psychologically in his personal history. But yeah, so I just think Ichigo's a great character.
Yeah. He is. He's I wouldn't buy that criticism either, because I think there is a certain kind of selflessness to him wanting to just kind of like, and this comes out I think in other characters who show up too. Um, everyone is trying to protect the people they love or their friends or whatever. And it's honestly, this also reminds me a lot of Demon Slayer too. The plots seem very similar to me.
I know that Bleach influenced Demon Slayer. I have not actually read or seen it. I know that it's
Yeah.
supposed to be really good though.
Yeah, and I think there's something I think that especially when you're targeting young, boys, 13-year-old boys, young teenage boys, right? There's something almost like kind of catechetical that for what they're reading, that I think is very important about the literature that is aimed at them, because they're things that you're kind of becoming aware of at that age, right? Is you're like, okay, I have, maybe certain gifts, certain flaws, whatever. You're just becoming much more aware of like who you
Yeah.
are as a young man. And then, it seems like a lot of literature kind of is proposing an answer where here's how you're going to use that. Here's the way that you use whatever gifts you have, right? And in a way that is toward for good,
Yeah,
and
constructive.
that's constructive, right? And I think this one here, he's a gifted young man, but we can see that this is the right way to use essentially his talents. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I enjoyed it. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we want to kind of touch on. I mean, just the art. Yeah, I mean,
it's cool.
yeah, it's just cool, right? Like that's the word for it,
Yeah,
right? I mean, there's lots of sort of technical points to be made, but just kind of speaking generally, like Kubo, right? He has this like love of fashion, and he can just craft I don't know, he has this kind of sense of, for lack of a better term, camera angles. Like I'm looking at this
yeah,
on my page 31, right when So Rukia had put this sort of spell on Ichigo, and Ichigo starts to try to break it, and Rukia says like, "Don't try to do that. It like could literally kill you. You're a human. You can't do that." And he just cracks it open. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that you have like on the right hand page at the top, right, you've got Ichigo's eye, as he's listening to his little sister explain what's going on, and then you see his sister like on the ground in intense pain. Then you just have this cut of like his mouth gritting his teeth, and just the shots, right? The composition there,
Mm-hmm.
the way that he shows, right, and right after he snaps it, right, like you don't have this triumphant hero pose of him. You have of Ichigo. You have like behind him, you show where the keto is. He shows where the keto is broken. You see Ichigo's face in the side. Like there are just these choices of how to compose the panels
Yeah.
that are really effective for storytelling. Like you know what's going
Yeah.
on, but it's also just cool.
It is. Yeah. I think that's kind of the thing is there's so many panels when you look at it, and I just picture myself at this age reading this and going, "Wow, that's really cool." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if it has to be necessarily deep. There's certain superheroes. I feel like Batman. Like one of the big appeals about Batman is he just looks cool. You know,
yeah,
as opposed to like most other superheroes, kind of look a little silly. And a lot of times, and Batman just kind of lucked out in the fact that he looks cool, so it's fun to be like, oh yeah, I'd like to look like Batman, and I think there's like, yeah, like Ichigo, like there's so many panels where it's like, yeah, like, I'd love to wear a gi and swing a
yeah,
katana and look as,
yeah,
like that looks like fun.
yeah. And I think like possibly Kubo's greatest gift is character design. So
Mm-hmm.
over the course of those 74 volumes, there I would guess there are 200 plus immediately recognizable characters, like named characters who have a position in this world, and like they have like you see them in the panel and you immediately know, okay, this is Gin, this is Renji, this is Ukiura, like where like oftentimes literally just like seeing their shadow, okay, it's this character, and they'll have and most of those, in addition to having these immediately recognizable, that like visually immediately recognizable image, they also have a particular power set and way that the action around them works, basically. And like Kubo just is, and they're all cool,
Right. Yeah.
they just from seeing them, you're like, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we're sort of saying that word over and over again, but I think like that is like essential to the appeal of Bleach is just
Right.
like Kubo knows how to make stuff that's cool, and
Yeah.
you just want to look at it, and you just want to see. Yeah,
That's important to, I think when you're, I mean, I think it's also the appeal of like a Wolverine for me, at least as a kid,
yeah, absolutely right. Wolverine is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's something about it. Like when you're a boy, you like that's a powerful word, like
Yeah,
and there's something really attractive about that. Maybe you want to be like that. Maybe that's like because you're aspiring to be cool or something. But yeah, I think there's kind of no other way to say it. It's just the designs really work and they're very appealing too. You know.
yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about Rukia. We've been talking about Ichigo, when people look about his family. Rukia gets much more of a fleshed out character later. First chapter, you don't get that much of a sense of her. But what was your kind of sense for in the first chapter there?
I think you're right. I think she's a little less clearly defined, but as she grows on you, one of the hilarious jokes is her like narrating the story with her sketchbook. That's like really
Yeah, with
like
the like
these
little bunny
cartoonish
drawings.
girly jaw. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you're like, why? Yeah. But I'd say she does not stand out initially as much to me. One of the things I did struggle with, I will say, and it's more, I think, just a cultural translation, but keeping a lot of these characters straight, mostly because of the names. I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
Oh dang, like who is that? Because
Like,
it
who's
just
Kago
like,
again? Who's
yeah,
Mizuru?
or these, yeah, if they just had normal like Western boy and girl names, like I feel like I could
Yeah.
have tracked him a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh wait, is that, who is that again now? And so that is one of the things, like, with, because there's so many characters that he introduces here,
Yeah.
very quickly, and just keeping them straight initially, they become a lot clearer. But like, she was one that I'd be like, oh yeah, what is her deal again? A lot of the time,
Yeah.
when she comes back into it, I think she's good, but I
Yeah.
think she gets better.
I feel like Russian novels are similar, where like I kind of,
Right.
especially in college when we were reading something, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the one whose name starts with FY or what, it's just sort of like remembering, remembering some of the beginnings. I don't know how to pronounce,
Yeah.
Ilyevich or whatever. Yeah, and I think, and it gets easier. I mean, I don't want to say this in a spoiler way, but like right now, practically everyone we know is a human being. It's like you've got, yeah, you've got human beings, then you got the big bad hollows. And soon you start to get a lot more characters who are, like, even though they obviously are not named, like, you've never met someone named Renji or Byakuya. But, like, once you see that, like, you're seeing these people in combat, you're seeing them within the context of a larger society, it's, like, much easier to keep straight. Whereas it's like, here are a bunch of high school students. And, like, you remember, who Orihime is, because she's, like, big red at the beginning. Remember who Chad is, because he's the one huge hulking Mexican dude.
Right. Yeah.
Like maybe you're like, oh, there's this one lesbian chick, but like, but other than that, they're kind of like all mushing together. How do I keep these straight? That like as a Western reader coming to it, but like I do think I mean, I like a lot of these sort of these human characters. They do tend to kind of fade into the background in later volumes, except for like, I mean, so Orihime is a main character. Rukia, obviously, I mean, she's not human, but Rukia, Ichigo, Orihime, Chad, and there's another one who we'll meet soon. Um, Stay very prominent, but the other ones all kind of into the
Yeah.
background, and so they are a little, but I do think they are well defined characters, particularly for somebody who's not used to reading manga, isn't used to the different names and the stylistic
Yeah.
conventions. It can be a
I think
little,
it's more of just a cultural translation thing than,
yeah.
a criticism I would level at it, at the writing.
Do we want to turn to the next story? Maybe if you want to
Sure.
summarize the story with Orihime.
Yeah. So yeah, Rukio now living is am I Gijai? How do you pronounce this?
Gigai, yeah. This
Gigai.
artist is the
Okay.
human body, yeah.
Yeah. So she enrolls in Ichigo's school to kind of guide him as a Soul Reaper. So we meet Ichigo's, as we've discussed, kind of eclectic classmates, and something's particularly up with Orohime. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Orihime, yeah. Orihime,
Orihime.
Orihime, yeah. There's like a
Yeah.
little bit of a roll on the R, but it doesn't really.
Yeah. And, she's a buxom young lady in typical anime style. And she's clearly being stalked by a hollow. She has like these wounds and stuff that kind of indicate like there's a hollow after this girl. And then when it appears at Orihime's house, we learn that the hollow is actually her dead brother, Sora. And this is kind of expanding the lore of what these evil spirits actually are. We learn
Yeah,
that really what hollows are undeparted human spirits who have something like that's tethering them to this world, basically. And if they don't depart, they start devouring their family members to ease their pain. Is kind of what they do, which is
yeah.
kind of sinister.
And then after that, they'll just sort of continue this like
Right, this cycle of destruction.
unsatiable hunger, yeah,
Yeah,
to devour other souls.
yeah. So her brother is a hollow who's now after Orihime, and Sora, her brother, loved Orihime, but he became a hollow, particularly when she stopped praying for his soul after he died. So over the course of this, Orihime confronts Sora and tells him that the only reason she stopped praying for him was because she didn't want him to see how much she was suffering. It wasn't because she stopped caring about him, but she didn't want him to suffer with
Yeah,
her, basically.
yeah,
So, Ichigo and Rukia are fighting Sora as a hollow, but he has a moment of clarity and asks them to like basically like reap him, like kill him.
yeah,
And Ichigo doesn't want to because he's like, hey, this is, Orihime's brother. Am I killing it? Or, what's going on here? But Rukia says that actually like reaping the soul doesn't destroy the soul. It's cleansing it from sin. So it can move on to, pass on to the soul society. And so Sora bids Orihime farewell and is cleansed and vanishes into the next world. And at the sort of in like an epilogue at the end of this episode, we're introduced to another classmate of
Yeah,
Ichigo,
let's
Chad.
turn that after we
Yeah.
get through the Orihime stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
So this sort of story with Orihime. Well, what do you think of Orihime as a character?
I liked Orihime a lot. I mean, she's kind of, like who was like my kids always say, oh, there's the pervy anime character, right? Which is like, I think
Wait till
that's
we get to later volumes. There are unfortunately some. There are like four really just pervily
okay.
defined characters. She's
Yeah.
like she generally dresses pretty
Yeah.
reservedly and honestly, though she is, let's say, very well endowed in a way that's not particularly realistic to human proportions. There's far worse coming, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. It seems like kind of a staple of manga,
Yeah,
but I thought she was a great character. I thought I mean, and that's why I'm kind of forgiving. And this is where, another weird strength I think of manga is I feel like the female characters actually have a lot more range than Western, especially modern Western characters.
yeah,
Like I don't think you could do Orihime as a character in like a Western comic without getting tons of criticism. But she's actually a really funny. I mean, she's not stupid. She's shown to be intelligent,
yeah,
but she's kind of dreamy. Like
yeah.
she
She's
has
dreamy
you
and
get
she's kind of
inside her
girly,
head.
stereotypically.
Yeah, she's very feminine. You get inside her head, and there's these hilarious sequences of like
Yeah,
this fantasy she's having because she has a crush on Ichigo that morphs into her like winning a race. But it's
yeah.
like what is it's
That bit
really
is so
funny.
great.
Yeah, and she's like it ends with her like winning a boxing match. You're like, what happened?
Yes.
Everyone's like, so she's very caring, yeah, very feminine, and yeah, I don't know. I thought she was, but she's also has like a very tragic kind of painful past that she's dealing
Yeah.
with the loss of
And
her
I do
family.
think
Yeah.
throughout Bleach there are a lot of like really distinct female characters with very different motivations and
Mm-hmm.
relationships that are attended to. Even though it's sort of in the background of these massive world-shattering fights, um, which oftentimes various women are taking part in. Yeah, and I do think that I think he does take. I mean, it's funny, right? Because it's a big sword goes smash kind of a
Yeah.
manga. And it's not like I wouldn't describe it as like a psychologically intense manga in the way that, like I mean, I think of the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion as like psychologically intense
Right.
in a way that like a French existentialist play might be. But he is, I think, very attentive as a writer to characters' interior lives. Like he really and I mean I think this is particularly strong with characters he introduces in the first 20 or so volumes. I mean, and in that time you get, I would say, like 40 or so really really well defined characters with distinct backstories and emotional and psychological pasts and states
Yeah.
that like you get to sort of see go through everything that happens. Yeah, and I think like Orihime is just she's kind of a charming character. Like
Yeah.
she's fun to read about. She's a sweetheart. She's very intelligent, but she's not showy at all, and she's very self-effacing. And you do find out, right? She has this very tragic backstory with abusive parents and her older brother, who was, I think, like a decade or so older, who ended up like running away from home with her and taking care of her until he died. And there's just that really beautiful moment sort of before her brother's soul is cleansed, where she sort of recalls the day that he died, right? And she
Mhm.
he had given her this hairpin, and she was mad about something, didn't wish him a good day when he left, and he was hit
Yeah.
by a car and died, and that she's regretted that this whole time. She says to him, where is it? Yeah, Kake, have a nice day, as he sort of fades away. I just think
Yeah.
that's really beautiful sort of series of shots.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree, this is one of those areas where, um, if you're dealing with boys literature, like the two things, that you're going through as like a boy of 13 or whatever would be first, how do I deal with like the gifts I have, right? How do I use them in a productive way? Or, the weaknesses, the strengths, all that kind of stuff, which, this is good for. But there's also like, I think like, sexual attraction, meaning like attraction between the sexes, is
Yeah.
going on. And like, how do I relate to the opposite sex is a
Yeah.
major question that like
Yeah.
suddenly becomes really important. And I think that is something that is so poorly done in so much stuff aimed at kids nowadays, which it used to be much better, right? But just it's almost like people are scared to touch that for some reason. I don't know if it's just because I don't know. I mean, there's whole
Yeah,
kinds of
and I
stuff, but
think also
it's
it's
really
done
vanished.
like when it's. I mean, I'm just thinking of a few examples. I don't want to call things out too much, but like I think there can be a hesitancy around it. I mean, it's strange, right? It's sort of paradoxical, right? Because in certain ways, our media like often sexualizes kids a lot more now,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, there are so many fewer romantic stories or sort of like
Mm-hmm.
cute, you know, teenagers or kids just sort of falling for each other. I mean, I think of the distinct lack of romantic relationships in a lot of sort of recent Disney movies, and obviously that's animation, it's not comics. But
Well, I
I
think
do think
one
it can
example that
a
leaps to
large
mind is
kind of.
like, sorry, I was just going to say one example that leaps to mind is like Star Wars, right? In the original trilogy, like, the kind of,
Han and
weirdly
Leia
handled.
was a huge, yeah,
Yeah.
really enjoyable part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just the attraction between, who, it got weird when it became Princess Leia became Luke's sister, I guess. But that was a major part of it, like this attraction right there. And then like the sequel trilogy is like the most sterile film series of films, whatever you want to say about them, like it's like scared. It's bizarre like how scared
Well,
it is of
it's
like,
interesting too because right, like the
yeah.
prequel trilogy, um, the the sort of disordered love between Anakin and Padme, the kind of possessive, right? And that I
Right.
think is a very real temptation for like well, I was gonna say especially young men, but it probably goes both ways. But like young people in relationships there, and I mean it continues on for the rest of your life, but like if you don't realize it's unhealthy and deal with it, you can destroy the universe. You can
Right.
make the Jedi
Yeah.
Order fall,
You
right?
become
Like
Darth Vader.
disordered love. I mean, like there's a reason that many of Shakespeare's tragedies, right, and some of his more political tragedies, Antony and Cleopatra, like disordered love makes the city fall. Um, and some of his comedies too sort of deal with this. Like Measure for Measure is one of my favorites, and it like the failure to kind of like help people to develop the ability to love in like productive, positive ways has like ramifications for their own lives, for their families, for their city or country or whatever. I do think that there's this, and in Bleach, you have sort of in the background, it's very quiet, but you have these feelings between Orihime and Ichigo that I think are really compelling precisely because they are two very different characters.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff that I don't want to, again, I don't want to be spoilery for later volumes, but at least at this point, it's very clear like Ichigo is this very, let's say, stereotypically masculine, like
He's
rebellious,
macho.
but,
Yeah.
but good-hearted kind of a guy. And Orihime is sort of stereotypical feminine, kind of reserved. I mean, she's much more than that. I'm not trying to like she has, but like she is a bit more passive, quieter, more reserved, and I think that they like bring very good things out in each other. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like most 13-year-old boys don't really want to read stories where that's front and center. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm 33. I now am like, give me a Jane Austen. This is great. I love that, like this is helping me think about my own relationships. Like this is great. Um, But the average 13-year-old doesn't really want the love stuff to be front and center. But I do think kind of having it in the background can be really good. And I think that the way that it's done in Bleach is really good. And this actually, there's a brief, just sort of brief thing on a kind of controversy in the anime. In a few of the early episodes, they have these scenes that kind of imply Rukia has feelings for Ichigo, which basically aren't
Hmm.
present in manga. And so there's this huge group of anime only fans haven't read, sorry, not anime only fans, but anime only
Yeah.
fans who have not read the manga who like really ship Ichigo and Rukia and like
Okay.
hate this thing in the background with Orihime of like, why is it doing this? Like, who likes Orihime? She's dumb and blah, blah, blah. Like, um, but it's not, I mean, at least in my reading, present in the manga at all. And I really like Ichigo and Orihime as a kind of potential couple that you want to see get together.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
Do we want to turn to Chad and the parakeet?
Yeah. Let's maybe we'll wrap up here. And, yeah. With good. Yeah. Do you want to kind of summarize the
Sure, sure. Yeah,
parakeet story?
so we're introduced to this other friend of Ichigo's, Chad, a real Chad of a young man
Yeah.
who adopts a talking parakeet, but this parakeet can talk far better than any bird should be able to. Ichigo continues his work as a substitute Soul Reaper. We meet a bunch more of his classmates who begin to experience strange spiritual phenomena. A hollow seems to be somehow connected to Chad's parakeet, begins attacking people. We learn that the bird contains the spirit of a boy whose mother was murdered by this hollow when he was alive. He was a serial killer. After he died, he was transformed into this hollow, started hunting him. Chad, though he's not a soul reaper and can't even see the hollow, knows something's going on and has kind of like seems to almost sense like where he is and is
Yeah.
just punching the hollow.
Right.
Rukia starts to sort of guide him, be like, punch here, no up, no down, grab
Yeah.
that. There's this great scene with a telephone pole. Then eventually Ichigo joins in, and like there's this really the hollow is intense. He's killed two soul reapers. He has these like parasitic things, like stuff that turns into bombs or whatever. Um,
Yeah. He was
Ichigo's
great.
able to defeat him, but instead of being cleansed, this hollow is sent into hell. And Rukia explains that not all souls pass in the Soul Society. The Zanpakuto, the huge sword, only cleanses you of like serious sins committed as a hollow. If you've committed horrible sins in life, you're sent to hell. The boy's soul is freed from the parakeet, and there's this very sweet moment where Chad can kind of see and communicate with him, and Chad says, when I die and go to Soul Society, I'll give you a piggyback ride. We'll get to hang out. Um, so he goes to join his mother in the Soul Society, and now the parakeet starts behaving like a normal talking bird. So, what'd you think of this story, and what'd you think of Chad?
I loved it. I love Chad. Like as soon as he shows up, he has a great introduction. He an I beam falls on him and he catches it. He's clearly just like totally this like jacked beyond all reason teenager, and especially when he defends, there's this scene with bullies that are trying to, beat Ichigo up with like brass knuckles. And it's again just a moment of like, as I was reading this, I was laughing out loud because he grabs one of those bullies and just the perspective as he like throws him like 100 yards away. This guy who's gonna attack Ichigo with brass knuckles is so good. It just cracked me up.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's similar I'd say kind of his mission in life seems similar to Ichigo in a sense
yeah,
that
you can see
he's
why
a
they're friends.
yeah, he's a very gifted young man. I mean, he's ridiculously strong, but he's using his strength in a to defend, right? That's his
Yeah,
whole deal is like he's going to protect the weak.
yeah,
And that's what he's about and like kind of like very different like whereas Ichigo's kind of like this really emo kind of, fast talking, kind of emotes quite a bit. He's very stoic. Chad is like,
Yeah,
rarely emotes, but he has kind of
yeah,
a heart of gold. He loves this
yeah,
parakeet. He's kind to children. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
he
Big fan.
especially like this introduces Chad, right? So Orihime is, introduced and sort of given the background story and right near the beginning. Chad, we have to wait till volume 5 and we really get to know his background, and it's really beautiful. I'll just kind of leave it there, and then we can see if we can just finish off volume 2. So in the final story of the second volume, Rukia gives Ichigo soul candy, which she bought at a strange store nearby with this character whom we're going to get to know quite well, called Kisuke Urahara. That is called by Ichigo Old Hat and Clogs because he wears a hat and clogs. I used to have a T-shirt with him on it that I bought at Hot Topic in about 2007. So the soul candy, right? So in order for Ichigo to go fight Hollows, Rukia has been using this glove that pushes his soul out of his body, and then his body just sort of flops down and lays there for hours or how long it takes. So she gets the soul candy, which allows the soul, this artificial soul, to enter Ichigo's body and take over so that he can go fight. So Ichigo can go fight, and his body isn't just lying in a gutter somewhere. Fortunately, the soul he swaps with uh, does not have the like chipper, honest, earnest personality it's supposed to. Although Ichigo doesn't want him to have that personality either, because he says, "I've worked hard to cultivate this image in people's minds," which is very telling. But anyway, so it turns out though that this guy has quite a personality. He leaps through the window of his school like 2 or 3 floors up, and ends up horrifying kids in his class by flirting with Orihime because she's the hottest girl in the class, and kissing her hand, introducing himself. Everybody's freaking out. Turns out he's not a normal sort of soul substitute soul, but instead is a mod soul, which were developed in experiments to have sort of particularly strong abilities to basically help fight hollows. The idea was that you give them to dead bodies and they would help fight hollows, but the experiment was abandoned because it ended up being argued, look, this is unethical, we can't keep going with this. uh, and all the mod souls were to be destroyed, but this one made it out by accident. He is not a villain, right? He initially overhears these little boys playing a video game, and they're saying, "Oh, I hate this character. I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna delete it. Like I'm gonna make a better one." And the guy in Ichigo's body breaks their video game. But then when a Hollow shows up, he ends up saving the kids from it. So he does have this kind of heroic tendency there too. Ichigo comes and slays the Hollow and gets very angry with this soul. Through conversation, through the action, we discover that this modified soul, sorry, he's later going to have a name, and I'm not saying it,
Yeah.
but this modified soul doesn't want to harm anyone, doesn't want to kill anyone innocent, and has this very sort of moving, I think, explanation of like, I was brought into being by these people, and like I knew that I was for the chopping block very soon after I came into existence, and so I just was waiting to be incinerated, to be killed like all of my brothers and sisters, and I accidentally got shipped out. So Kisuke Urahara, Old Hat and Clog, shows up and is going to take him back, and Rukia says, "No, no, I'm happy with my purchase. I don't want to return him. Don't take him back." And so Rukia puts him back into candy form to save for later use. Yeah, and this, well, I don't know, what do you think of this story?
This story goes places. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, it's
It kind of,
unexpected, right?
yeah, it really does. Yeah, it starts out of left field. It's funny. It almost reminds me of like a Calvin and Hobbes kind of plot,
Yeah,
and
I can see that.
where especially when he shows up at first and he's all like this like good student, but then he just kind of goes totally haywire. So it
Yeah,
starts off very comedic, and it's great. It's really fun to read, and then it ends on a very poignant note. We're like, oh, there's a lot more here. This isn't just this is a person that wants to live, that has a real zest for life,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
so Yeah, so
Lana
it,
Del
it,
Rey.
it really shifts moods at the end in a way that works very well, I think. And it's a fun introduction to this character who is going to be a lot of fun kind of throughout the series,
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
he's great.
Yeah.
He's a character. I have my criticisms with the anime, but he's a character who's even better in the anime, I think, because he's given some of these like, very comedic subplots that are not in the manga, but like are very fitting with his character. Yeah, he's great. You know, I do think there's like a little bit of kind of moral reflection here, that like for me at least is very reminiscent of issues around fertilized embryos, right? Frozen embryos made through, related to IVF and things. That uh, there are these lives sitting in freezers, and the majority are never born. And I think that right there's this. It's this really it's striking, right? Because he's not like a sappy character, and long term he's not a sappy character, right? He's this very funny, not to be crass, but kind of horny character,
Yeah.
like being a creepo. But he does have this backstory and this depth that like he,
And I think that actually works really well because of his kind of just manic nature, right? Like
yeah,
you get this guy in a body and he's like crazy because he wants to
yeah,
live, you know.
yeah,
He likes everything. He's like running, he's horny, he's like, whatever. It's
yeah,
this whole like, this real zest for life
yeah,
just because he doesn't have much of it, So I don't know. I think it works from he's a fun character, but it also works from kind of a deeper on a deeper level.
yeah. There's this moment. There's two more brief sort of character things I want to bring up before we close. So one is we get a little bit more characterization with Orihime when after sort of the fake Ichigo has come in and done all this stuff, and everybody's kind of flipping out, and people are talking about like what happened. And there's this one character, Chizuru or something. It's not with Chi, it's with CH, but it's very mid 2000s because there's this one lesbian girl in the high school, and there's still lots of social stigma around it. And so one of my favorite characters, Tatsuki, who's Orihime's best friend, she's like just like massively shaming Suiro for being for like constantly flirting with Orihime, and Chizuru, that's it. And she's saying that swine defiled my Orihime. That's a lot worse than misusing a window. And you just see in the background, very quietly said by Orihime, it wasn't him. Huh? It wasn't who, Orihime? It wasn't Ichigo. That person was not Ichigo. Right? And there's this,
Yeah.
and it's not dwelt on necessarily, right? Like it doesn't come back in their story, but there is this sense like you're sort of asking like, okay, like does she have like a spiritual awareness that this is not Ichigo, or does she just know Ichigo so well that it's like nothing would make him act like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of strange. But so the other kind of character thing. So we don't get to know him much, but what did you think of that shopkeeper guy, Kisuke?
Yeah, as soon as he shows up, I'm like, yeah, he's gonna be coming in more, almost
Yeah,
definitely, because you don't design two characters like this and just have them be like one-offs, right? Because him and whoever the guy who looks like, like his, I don't know if it's his sidekick, you kind of breeze over them here, but they're very memorable.
yeah,
They have great designs, they stand out. And so yeah, I don't have a lot of thoughts based off of this particular one, other than that, as soon as you see them, they're going to be important to the plot.
yeah, yeah. He's a character who I really enjoy, and he's also there over the course of the series. There are more, I mean, I'd almost say kind of like bioethical themes at points, similar to like kind of like with this story that he is sometimes involved with. Um, yeah, he kind of forces you to ask some questions, but he's also like a very fun character. Yeah, but we'll get more into him over time. All right, so what are we'll be reading more Bleach in future episodes, but with these sort of first two volumes, what are your kind of what's your overall kind of picture? What do you think of it?
I thought this was great. I enjoyed it more than I expected.
Yeah, I know you're always a little skeptical when I suggest manga.
Well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be, but I would say manga is a commitment if you're not enjoying it. Like
For sure, for sure.
it's like this, but this one really, it immediately pulled me in, and it gets better as it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So highly recommended. I think, as far as, kind of content warnings go, it's got violence, but it's cartoony violence. It's not disturbing. It's
It
not.
does get a bit like there's definitely blood there, you know. I mean, it's black
Yes.
and white, but like, and it's mostly monsters being fought at this point. But I mean, there's some of the violence does get intense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on the level of like a demon. Well, it's not as much as a Demon Slayer. Actually, Demon Slayer is much more violent to this point, at least. Um, and then there's some minor sexual innuendo, but I'd say it's generally appropriate for like teens 13 and up.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
PG-13, I'd say. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so if you're concerned, read, like, thumb through the content before passing it on. But I think, any 13-year-old boy, this is like a great
yeah,
read. I mean, as I'm speaking as an adult, I really enjoyed it, but like,
yeah.
this is a blast.
And I mean, with some of the later volumes, so there's never any nudity, but like in some of the later volumes, there are some like really like, you know, like the kind of thing you'd see in 90s American superhero comics where it's just like this is way
Yeah.
creepier than any human woman would be wearing to fight in this kind of battle, you know,
Right,
and it's
right.
you know, like slight like sort of gratuitous moments that I find distasteful personally, but I look past it because the other stuff is so good.
Yeah, yeah. So highly recommended. My son loves it. I
Yeah.
really
And
enjoyed it a
volume three,
lot.
the next volume is of the whole 74 volumes is like probably in my top five. I
Okay.
love volume three. It's I just yeah, I think volume three is beautiful. Um all right, so we here at Truth Beauty Comics alternate between stories. So we'll be back with Bleach again in 2 episodes, where we'll be talking about Volume 3 and maybe Volume 4, but probably just Volume 3. And next week we'll be returning for one more week of Tintin. We'll be reading King Ottokar's Scepter. When Tintin is invited to the kingdom of Sildavia on an historical tour, he's thrown into a conspiracy to overthrow the crown by sinister forces. In one of his more political stories, Hergé will build his world with an impact on future adventures.
If you enjoyed this episode of Truth Beauty Comics, there are 3 things you can do to support it. First is to just keep listening and tell your friends about the podcast.
The second is to review the podcast, giving us 5 stars wherever you listen to it. The last thing you can do is consider contributing to our Patreon with a monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get perks like access to exclusive episodes, voting on topics for upcoming episodes, and even an original drawing from Levi. But most of all, you can help make this podcast sustainable.
That's the end of the episode. You can reach us at truthbeautycomics@gmail.com or on our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and remember to take comics seriously and have fun while doing it.